The wind hit like a fist, slamming snow against the outpost windows until the glass rattled like teeth chattering in the cold. I was alone, marking my last map of the day, trees too dry, too close to the ridge, when the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the room, and the chill seeped through the cracks, turning my breath to fog. That's when the door banged open, snow swirling in behind her. The ranger. She stomped inside, pack slung over one shoulder, face half buried in her scarf. "Storm's worse than they said," she muttered, dropping her gear. We both knew what that meant. Trapped. She unzipped her pack, pulled out supplies, and just one sleeping bag. Our eyes met in the lantern's weak glow, the air already too thick with what wasn't said. The outpost sat miles from anywhere, a squat box of weathered pine nailed together against the mountain's indifference. I'd been here 3 months, watching pines sway like they were testing the wind's temper. The walls creaked now under the snow's weight, each groan a reminder that winter didn't care about plans or solitude. I was the fire spotter, the one who climbed ridges at dawn, eyes scanning for smoke or dry branches that could spark hell. My body carried the marks of it, calluses from ropes, aches in my shoulders from hauling gear up steep trails. Solitude suited me, or so I told myself. It kept the past at bay, the kind of quiet that let you rebuild without questions. She burst through the door like the storm itself, shaking flakes from her coat in sharp, efficient motions. Snow melted into puddles on the floorboards, and she hung her parka by the stove, revealing a frame built for the work. Broad shoulders under a flannel shirt, hands rough from gripping reins or axes. Her name was Riley, she'd said over radio check-ins, but up close, her voice carried a steadiness that cut through the howl outside. "Road's gone," she said, wiping her face with a sleeve. Her eyes, dark and shadowed from the drive, flicked over the room, my maps pinned to the wall, the lantern flickering on the table. Fatigue etched lines around her mouth, but she moved like someone who'd outrun worse than this blizzard. We inventoried what she brought. Canned beans, a coil of rope, matches sealed in wax. The cold pressed in, turning the air sharp enough to bite. Then she pulled the sleeping bag from the bottom of her pack. A single, thin roll of nylon and down, rated for 1. "I figured I'd drop supplies and head back," she said, her apology flat, like she'd practiced it. "Didn't count on the whiteout." The words hung there, heavy as the frost building on the panes. I nodded, throat tight. Sharing meant surviving, but it also meant no space for the walls I'd built. My pulse kicked up, not just from the dropping temperature. Night fell fast, the sky outside a solid wall of gray. We crouched by the stove, feeding it scraps of split pine I'd chopped days before. Flames licked up, casting shadows that danced across her face, high cheekbones, a scar faint along her jaw. Silence thickened like the ice on the windows, broken only by the wind's low moan. I stirred the embers, feeling the heat on my palms, while she checked the barometer, her fingers steady despite the chill. "This'll hold till morning," she said, but her voice carried doubt. We ate beans straight from the can, spoon scraping tin, the salt sharp on my tongue. Her knee brushed mine as we sat close to the fire, accidental but electric. I pulled back, focusing on the stove's glow, but the outpost felt smaller already, the storm sealing us in like it had plans of its own. We couldn't let the fire die, not with the cold clawing at the door like it wanted in. I stood first, grabbing the axe from its hook by the wall. "More wood," I said, voice rough from the dry air. She nodded, pulling on her gloves without a word. The stack outside was half buried already, snow drifting against the shed like white dunes. We shoveled a path, breaths puffing white, the wind slicing through our layers. I swung the axe into a log, splitting it clean, the thud echoing against the howl. She hauled the pieces inside, arms straining under the weight, muscles shifting under her shirt. Our hands met once, passing a split. Rough palms, accidental spark that warmed more than the wood. I pulled back, quick, stacking by the stove, feeling the heat rise but not enough to chase the flush in my chest. Talk came in fits, like the flames licking up. She crouched by the stove, poking the embers. "Trail from the pass is a mess," she said, eyes on the fire. "Seen avalanches take out whole ridges. One wrong step." Her voice trailed, steady but edged with the weight of miles she'd covered alone. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed to hold in the warmth. Up here, it's the fire risk, I replied. Mark the dead ones, note the wind patterns. Days blur into scanning horizons. Solitude in my words, the routine that kept me moving without feeling. She glanced up, her gaze holding mine a beat too long. Sounds lonely. Simple, but it landed heavy, stirring something I'd buried deep. My heart guarded itself, walls built from losses that still ached like old fractures. A partner gone too soon, leaving echoes in empty rooms. Strength like hers, quiet, unyielding, pulled at those threads, reminding me of hands that once steadied mine on worse nights. I turned away, feeding another log to the flames, the crackle filling the quiet. But she moved closer, her shoulder brushing my arm as we both watched the fire build. The wind rattled the shutters then, a fierce shake that made the whole outpost shudder. Temperature plunged, frost creeping faster across the glass. Closer, she murmured, and we shifted, knees touching now, backs to the wall. Heat from her side seeped through, a barrier against the bite. I felt the pull, the way her presence filled the space I'd claimed as mine. The storm didn't let up. Hours passed in that huddle, the lantern dimming as fuel waned. She checked the thermometer, dropping, steady, red line mocking us. We can't risk it, she said finally, voice low. One bag. Body heat's the only way through the night. Her eyes met mine again, unflinching. The suggestion practical but laced with the unspoken. Survival first, always. I nodded, pulse racing under my skin, hiding the thud behind a swallow. No choice in the wild. We banked the stove, embers glowing faint, and spread the bag on the narrow cot against the wall. Thin padding, zippers strained for two. Darkness settled thick, the wind a constant moan outside. We climbed in, backs turned, the space forcing contact, her shoulder to my back, legs tangled just enough. Heat built slow, unavoidable, her breath a warm rhythm against the chill. I stared at the shadowed beams, body tense, the night stretching ahead like uncharted trail. Her breath ghosted across the nape of my neck, steady and warm, cutting through the wool that scratched against my skin like dry pine needles. The sleeping bag pinned us tight, a narrow sleeve of fabric that trapped our heat but left no room for escape. I could feel the rise and fall of her chest against my back, each inhale pulling the air thinner, each exhale stirring something deep in my gut. The outpost's walls seemed to lean in, the storm outside a relentless drum that matched the thud in my ears. I shifted once, trying to carve space, but her leg brushed mine, solid, unyielding, and I froze, the contact sending a jolt that had nothing to do with the cold. I fixed my eyes on the ceiling beams, tracing the knots in the wood like they were maps I'd drawn myself. Count the cracks, one splitting the joist like lightning, two spider webbing from a nailhead. Anything to drown the pull, the way her presence filled the dark like smoke from a banked fire. My mind raced back to routines. Tomorrow's ridge check, the axe swing that cleared my head, but her scent crept in, pine sap and damp earth from her coat mixing with the faint salt of sweat. It was too much, too close. I'd chosen this isolation to keep the world at arm's length, to let old wounds scar over without interference. Now here she was, unraveling the quiet I'd claimed. The storm peaked then, a roar that shook the foundations, the outpost groaning like timber under too much load. Wind howled through unseen gaps, rattling the window frames until I thought they'd shatter. Snow pelted the roof in heavy sheets, and the cot creaked beneath us, threatening to give. Her body tensed against mine, a sudden rigidity that mirrored my own. In the dark, her hand found mine, fingers seeking, instinctive, lacing tight as if the building might come down. Palm to palm, rough calluses meeting mine, the grip a lifeline in the chaos. I didn't pull away. couldn't. The warmth spread up my arm, chasing the chill that clawed at the edges of the bag. She didn't let go. Minutes stretched, the storm's fury fading to a dull throb, but her hold stayed firm. "I lost someone out here once," she whispered finally, voice cracking like thin ice under boot. The words hung in the confined space, raw and unexpected. "Partner. We were mapping a trail, thought we had time before the squall hit." She slipped. Crevasse swallowed her whole. I dug for hours, but... A pause, her breath hitching. The quiet after was worse. Emptier. Her thumb traced a slow circle on my knuckle, not seeking comfort but sharing the weight, like handing over a loaded pack. I felt it then, the grief she carried, etched in the tremor of her voice, the way her body pressed closer not for heat, but for anchor. Words tumbled from me in the dark, spilling like embers from the stove. "I've been alone up here 3 months," I said, the confession low, pressed against the pillow. "After my last..." She left, said I was too buried in the work, too afraid to come down from the ridges. Isolation's easier. No one to lose if you don't let them in. My voice broke on the edge, the truth sharper than I'd meant. Her hand squeezed, a silent pull that drew more out. Nights scanning horizons for threats that weren't there, the ache of empty cots before this one. The bag felt warmer now, our shared breath sinking, the storm outside a distant echo. Vulnerability hung between us, fragile as frost, but real. Sleep came fitful, in snatches broken by gusts and the shift of bodies seeking more warmth. Her arm draped over my waist sometime in the night, loose but steady, her face buried against my shoulder. I didn't move, letting the rhythm lull me, the pull of her no longer a threat but a quiet truce. Dawn crept in slow, gray light filtering through iced panes, revealing snowdrifts piled high against the door. Untouched, unrelenting, sealing us deeper into the weight. Light filtered through the frosted windows, pale and unforgiving, pulling me from the shallow grip of sleep. Her arm still lay across my side, a weight that had settled sometime in the night, her breath steady against my neck. I eased away, careful, not wanting to wake her, the bag unzipping with a soft rasp that cut the quiet. The air hit cold, sharp as a blade, chasing the warmth we'd built. I stood, joints stiff from the cot's unyielding frame, and crossed to the stove. Embers glowed faint, a dull red pulse in the gray dawn. She stirred behind me, murmuring something low, then sat up, hair tousled, eyes bleary but alert. We moved deliberate, like we were circling each other in the dim space. I scooped snow from the sill, packed hard against the glass, and set it in the pot over the stove. She joined me, adding more in silence, our shoulders brushing as we worked the flames back to life. Water melted slow, dripping into steam that fogged the air thicker. No words yet, just the scrape of metal, the hiss of melting ice. Her gaze skipped mine when I passed the mug, fingers lingering a second too long on the handle. Heat rose from the stove, but it didn't touch the knot in my chest. The memory of her hand in mine through the storm's rage. The radio crackled to life next, static bursting like gunfire in the hush. I twisted the dial, voice from base cutting through choppy. Blizzards lock the passes. Roads out for at least 3 days. No chopper till it breaks. Her face tightened beside me, jaw set as she leaned in, listening to the confirmation. Trapped deeper, the world shrinking to these walls and the white void outside. I switched it off, the silence heavier now, pressing like the snow against the door. 3 days. Supplies for 2, maybe, if we rationed tight. Her eyes met mine then, steady but shadowed, the unspoken weight of waiting settling between us. We couldn't just sit. "Door," I said, grabbing the shovel from the corner. She nodded, pulling on her coat, the fabric rustling thick. Outside was a wall of white, drifts piled chest high, the wind still whipping flakes into our faces. I dug first, blade biting into the powder, muscles burning with each thrust. She shoveled beside me, heaving loads aside, but the storm fought back, fresh gusts filling the path as fast as we cleared. An hour in, my boots slipped on ice hidden under the snow, sending me sprawling into a drift. Cold shocked through my layers, face buried in white. She laughed then, a short burst that cut the wind, reaching down to haul me up. "Steady," she said, her grip firm on my arm, eyes crinkling at the edges. The sound warmed something raw, a brief crack in the weight, her hand lingering as she brushed snow from my shoulder. I managed a half smile, the lightness fleeting but real, pulling us back inside with arms full of doubt. Fuel ran low by midday, the stove's belly emptying faster than I'd gauged. We banked what was left, embers smoldering under ash, the room cooling quick. No choice but to huddle close, knees to chest on the floor, backs to the wall. Her side pressed to mine, heat sharing in the thinning air, the chill nipping at our edges. I felt the rise of her breath, the faint tremor in her frame. Bodies drawn together not just for survival, but the pull we'd both named in the dark. Afternoon shadows stretched long across the boards, light fading early under the overcast. Unspoken questions filled the space like smoke from dying coals. What now, after this forced nearness? Her shoulder nudged mine, a quiet anchor, as the wind moaned on. The embers died to a faint glow by late afternoon, the room's chill creeping back like fingers under the door. We sat there on the floor, shoulders touching, the silence broken only by the wind's low growl. She shifted, pulling her knees up, and started talking. Not the sparse words of before, but something deeper, like the storm had loosened the knots in her chest. "Ranger life's all pull and hold," she said, flexing her hand in the dim light. Calluses ridged her palm, thick from years of coiling ropes on sheer drops, hauling packs through mud that sucked at your boots. One slip on a ledge, and it's you against the drop. No time for doubt. Her voice carried the rhythm of trails she'd walked alone, the kind where every step tested your grip on the world. I watched her fingers, the way they traced an old scar across her knuckles, white and puckered, like bark torn by lightning. My own hands mirrored it, scars from thorns snagging during ridge climbs, ropes burning skin on hasty descents. "Same up here," I replied, holding out my palm for a beat, the rough match of our lives hanging between us. Spotting fire means seeing what could burn it all down. You learn to stand alone, eyes on the horizon. But her nearness stirred more than shared work. The scent of her, pine resin clinging to her shirt, earth from the trails, a faint warmth of skin, pulled at desires I'd buried under layers of routine. It was like the first thaw after freeze, cracking the ground I'd hardened against touch. My body leaned in without thought, drawn to the solid line of her arm, the curve of her neck shadowed by the fading light. She kept going, words flowing easier now, describing a summer patrol where fog swallowed the pass, leaving her blind to the cliffs. Felt the rope go taut, then nothing. Heart stopped till I heard her voice, my partner, calling back. Her eyes distant, fixed on the wall's grain. The story pulled me closer, heat building in the space between our words, her leg pressing mine as she gestured. Attraction coiled tight in my gut, sharp as a branch snap underfoot. I wanted to trace that scar, feel the stories etched in her skin. But old fears surged, betrayals that left me splintered, like a tree felled by storm, roots exposed and raw. I pulled away, sudden, feigning a shiver, rubbing my arms like the cold was the only bite. "Getting colder," I muttered, scooting toward the stove's ashes, putting inches between us. She sensed it, her gaze sharpening, unflinching as she turned my way. No push, just a quiet watch that saw through the retreat, the walls I'd thrown up like fallen timber. The air thickened, her silence an invitation heavier than the snow outside. I couldn't hold it back then. "It's not the cold," I admitted, voice low, words tumbling like loose gravel. "Connections out here. They break you worse than any fall." She left me hollow, said I hid too deep in the work, too scared to bridge the gaps. Now this pull. It terrifies me, like stepping off a ridge without rope. The confession hung raw, my chest tight, eyes on the floor to avoid her depth. Her hand found my arm, gentle but sure, fingers warm against the chill of my sleeve. She didn't speak at first, just held there, thumb brushing slow, a steady pressure that grounded the spin in my head. Her eyes met mine when I looked up, dark, steady, offering understanding without demand, like she'd walked her own shattered trails. "I know that edge," she said finally, voice soft as settling snow. "Lost her to the wild, but the real fear's in the quiet after. We don't have to rush the drop." The touch lingered, pulling the knot in me loose, vulnerability shared like embers passed hand to hand. No promises, just the weight lifted, her presence a bridge over the chasm I'd feared. Evening chill returned sharp, shadows pooling deep as the light bled out. The stove cold now, no fuel to fight the drop. We rose together, movements synced, the necessity of the bag drawing us back. Zipper rasped open on the cot, the narrow space waiting, unavoidable. Her shoulder brushed mine as we settled in, faces turned this time, the dark folding around us like a shared secret. The storm howled louder that night, a deeper roar that rattled the outpost like it was testing the nails holding us together. No more backs turned, no feigned distance. The bag's tight confines forced us face to face, breaths mingling in the narrow dark. Her eyes caught the faint glow from the window's ice, dark pools reflecting the chaos outside, and I saw the walls we'd both carried start to crack. The wind slammed against the walls, snow scraping like claws, but inside her nearness drowned it, her knee pressed to mine, the heat building unavoidable. No space left for pretense, the necessity stripping us bare, pulling us into the raw edge of what simmered between. We lay there, the cot creaking under our weight, the air thick with the scent of wool and shared warmth. Her hand found mine again, fingers lacing slow, deliberate, like she was mapping a trail she'd walked 1,000 times but never trusted. "What do you dream of out here?" she whispered, voice low against the gale, her thumb tracing lines across my palm, ridges and valleys, the calluses from ropes and axes. I felt the pull in her touch, steady but searching, drawing out the unspoken wants I'd buried under layers of routine. "Quiet ridges at dawn," I murmured back, words spilling soft. No threats on the horizon, just space to breathe without the weight. And someone to share the view, not the silence. Her gaze held mine, unflinching in the shadows, the confession hanging like mist in a canyon. Her fingers tightening, as if to anchor the vulnerability. Dreams turned to deeper currents, her stories weaving with mine. Nights she'd spent alone on patrol, stars sharp overhead, wishing for a hand to steady the loneliness. "Always thought the wild was enough," she said, breath warm on my cheek. "But it leaves you hollow, like a trail that circles back, empty." I shared fragments then, the ache of empty cots before this, the fear of roots too shallow to hold against the wind. Her touch shifted, palm sliding up my arm, tracing the curve of my shoulder. The gesture tender, exploratory, like scouting a safe path through underbrush. The storm's fury peaked outside, shutters banging, but her closeness muted it, our words a quiet counterpoint, building the bridge we'd skirted all day. My heartbeat thudded against her chest, a steady drum that synced with hers, the rhythm impossible to ignore in the crush of the bag. Desire sharpened then, sudden as a gust ripping through pines, coiling tight in my core, her lips close enough to taste the salt of her breath, the faint pine lingering on her skin. It wasn't just the cold driving us. It was the pull we'd named, the want that had simmered through shared labors and confessions. Her hand cupped my jaw, thumb brushing my lip, eyes searching mine in the dim, a question without words. I leaned in, the space vanishing, our breaths catching as lips met. Soft at first, tentative, then deeper, a linger that tasted of earth and need, her fingers threading into my hair. The kiss unfolded slow, boundaries dissolving like snow under sun, her body shifting closer, limbs entwining in the limited space. Warmth spread, skin against skin where layers peeled back, the bag a cocoon trapping the heat we generated. Her hand trailed down my side, steady pressure that chased the chill, our rhythm sinking to a quiet pulse that overrode the storm's rage. The world outside faded, wind a distant moan, replaced by the soft hitch of breaths, the press of her against me. Tender, unhurried, the intimacy a revelation in the dark. We moved together, exploration born of necessity and want, fading into the warmth of shared surrender, the night wrapping us tight. Dawn broke, clearer, pale light seeping through the cracks, pulling me from the haze of sleep. She stirred beside me, arm draped loose across my waist, her face soft in the gray. The storm had eased, drifts settling outside, but inner tempests brewed. What came next, with rescue looming and the wild waiting to pull us apart? Sunlight pierced the frost on the windows, weak but insistent, pulling me from the tangle of limbs and warmth. We rose together, bodies still pressed close from the night's hold, her arm sliding away slow as I sat up. The sleeping bag pooled around our waists, air cool against exposed skin where shirts had ridden up in sleep. She blinked into the light, hair falling across her forehead in dark strands, and smiled, soft, unguarded, the kind that crinkled her eyes and eased the lines fatigue had carved. Outside, the world remained white and wild, drifts sculpted by wind into sharp ridges, pines bent low under the load. But the howl had dulled to a whisper, the storm's fury spent, leaving silence that amplified our breaths. I swung my legs over the cot's edge, feet meeting cold floorboards that sent a shiver up my spine. She followed, stretching with a low groan, muscles shifting under her shirt, broad back, shoulders marked by faint red lines from the bag's seams. We moved without rush, gathering scattered clothes, her fingers brushing mine as we tugged on layers against the lingering chill. The outpost felt different now, walls less confining, the air carrying a faint tang of melting snow and our shared scent. Breakfast was simple. Last of the beans heated over revived embers, spoons clinking in tin as we sat knee to knee on the floor. Her gaze held mine over the rim of her mug, steam curling between us, the quiet comfort of the moment a balm after the raw edges of the night. The radio sputtered to life mid-morning. Static crackling sharp before a voice broke through. Bass confirming the blizzard's break. Chopper inbound by afternoon. ETA 2 hours, the operator said, words clipped and efficient. Freedom loomed, the passes opening. But it twisted something in my gut. Rescue meant separation. The wild pulling us back to separate trails. Her patrols through valleys, my ridges alone under endless sky. The unknown stretched ahead like uncharted fog. The intimacy we'd forged in this box, now fragile against the world's pull. She set the radio down, hand lingering on the dial, her face tightening as the implication settled. "It's over," she said, voice steady but edged, eyes searching mine for the same dread coiling in me. We talked then, words flowing easy as thawed streams, sitting cross-legged on the cot with the map spread between us. Futures unrolled like trails ahead, her next assignment scouting burns in the south, my contract extending through spring. Horizons that could diverge or loop back. "I don't want this to end at the door," I said, the admission raw, my hand finding hers across the rumpled bag. Her fingers laced with mine, calluses rough but grip sure, an anchor against the drift threatening to carry us apart. She squeezed, thumb tracing my knuckles slow. "It doesn't have to. Ridges aren't so far from passes. I could visit, check the outpost, see if the spotter's still scanning alone." The promise hung light, not binding, but real. A thread to hold against the solitude I'd feared returning to. Her eyes held no rush, just the quiet resolve that had drawn me in, the fear peeking sharp in my chest before easing under her touch. Packing came next, the deliberate motions that filled the hours till the hum grew. We rolled the sleeping bag tight, her hands overlapping mine on the zipper, touches lingering like final embers, fingers grazing wrists, shoulders bumping as we stowed cans and rope in her pack. Each brush sparked memory, the press of her body through the storm, confessions in the dark, the slow unravel of walls. The stove went cold, ashes swept into a tin, the room emptying as we prepared to leave the space that had held us. My pulse thudded steady, rebuilt from the isolation, her presence a hidden flame I'd carry down the mountain. The blizzard eased fully outside, wind dying to a sigh, and distant rotors throbbed on the air, approaching, inevitable, drawing us toward the light waiting beyond the white. The rotor hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls like a pulse quickening the air. We stood at the door, pack slung over shoulders, the outpost behind us stripped bare. Maps rolled, stove cold, the cot made neat, as if nothing had shifted in these walls. Her coat brushed mine as we stepped out, the fabric's rough weave catching for a second, a final tether in the thinning space. Snow crunched under our boots, fresh and deep, the drifts sculpted into waves that gleamed under the weak sun. Words stayed few, weighted like stones in a pocket. Her, ready, met my nod, the quiet carrying more than miles could hold. The chopper crested the ridge, blades slicing the white, kicking up powder that stung our faces like tiny warnings. We waited side by side, breath sinking in the chill. Her hand grazing my elbow once, steady as roots under soil. The pilot waved us in, door sliding open on the skid, and we climbed aboard, the cabin swallowing us whole. She settled across from me, knees almost touching in the tight space, eyes locking on mine as the bird lifted. The outpost shrank below, a dark speck buried in endless white, pines bowing like sentinels we'd leave behind. Wind buffeted the frame, but inside, her presence anchored me, the warmth from nights past lingering in the press of her gaze. No rush of fear now, just the solid thrum of engines matching the beat in my chest. She'd turned to the window, face half lit by the glare-off snow, and I saw the lines soften, the fatigue eased, replaced by something open, like a trail cleared after storm. We didn't speak over the noise, but her foot nudged mine, deliberate, a silent line drawn between seats. Hearts aligned in that touch. The pull we'd forged in the bag's confines, now a thread stretching beyond the peaks. The chopper banked, valleys unfolding below, rivers frozen silver, ridges I'd scanned alone, now mapped with her shadow in mind. Emotional crest hit then, not in words, but the quiet certainty. This wasn't fracture, but forge. Her hand found mine across the gap, fingers lacing tight, calluses familiar against my palm. The wild below blurred, but the connection held sharp, enduring like veins of quartz in granite. No cage of solitude waited, her whisper cut through the roar. I'll find the ridge. A vow carried on the updraft. Descent pulled us toward base, the world expanding, lights flickering in distant cabins, roads snaking clear of white. Inner peace settled deep, a rebuilt core from the isolation shattered and remade. Silence shifted, no longer a lock but an invitation. Her warmth tucked close like a flame banked against night. We touched down smooth, rotors slowing to a whine, the cold rush of air marking the end of our sealed world. She lingered in the doorway, coat flapping, eyes holding mine one last beat. Until the pass is open, she said, voice low under the dying hum. I nodded, the promise rooting firm. Carrying me forward changed. Trails ahead no longer empty. Her echo in every horizon scanned. Back in the bustle, reports filed and gears stowed, the mountain's quiet clung to me like frost melt. But it felt different. Lighter. The solitude now laced with anticipation. Her number burned in my pocket, a small weight heavier than any pack. The world pulled us apart for now, duties calling to separate paths. But the flame she'd kindled burned steady, hidden but alive. Nights would come with wind through pines, but no longer alone. The bridge we'd built spanning the gaps, inviting returns. I walked the trail back to base, snow crunching soft, her scent faint on my collar, the hope a quiet burn that warmed against the dusk. Her hand waved from the chopper's edge as it banked away, snow sparkling below like new beginnings etched in white. If this quiet pull resonates, share your own hidden warmth in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of finding home in the unexpected.